Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charmley. This is another historic church in Leicestershire. This is St John the Baptist's Grimston. Leicestershire is one of those parts of England that was dominated at one point by the Vikings, hence Grim, the name appearing, then Grim appearing. Grim, of course, is a reference to originally Norse god and eventually becomes a term for the devil, as often happens in terms of names of pagan gods being transferred to the devil. But originally it was just meant Grim's town or Grim's township. There's been a church here at least since the 11th century. There's a record of it in 1050 before the Norman conquest. But the present building is 13th century and later. It belonged for a while to the Knights Templar, until, of course, that order was dissolved and its assets, including the church here at Grimston, were passed on to the Knights Hospitaller, who held it until the dissolution, when the order in Britain, well, in England and Wales, is dissolved, obviously. Scotland's a separate kingdom at this point. And so, but the building here is largely 14th and 15th century in character. It was cruciform at one point, but the things about compass points. The north transept has been demolished. The south one remains. It's your simple type of cruciform building. So instead of having to build this big roof where the two join together, instead you've got just these extensions put out on either side. There is a clerestory. This looks to be probably late 14th, maybe early 15th century. So we'll have a look around. This is an ironstone building. At some point someone's taken all the plaster off the walls, which is usually a mistake in these cases because it makes for a fairly dark interior. But there's not a lot of stained glass, so there's plenty of natural light even on a slightly overcast summer day like this. So let's have a look around, shall we then? As usual, then we start at the west end. We have here the font. The bowl looks to be the oldest thing in the church. It may be 12th century, maybe 13th, may actually be 11th century. But over here is a very unusual item. This is the old church clock, which dates from about 1600, which makes it a very, very old clock. And you can see, obviously, it doesn't work anymore, but it's a wonderful piece of equipment. It wouldn't have had a clock face, it would just have struck the bell on the hour, so it just gave you the hours. You can see some windows have been blocked up. You can just see a blocked-in window here. Quite good, actually. It's the one good thing about removing the wall plaster. You can see where the windows used to be. Largely Victorian interior. You can see the stone pulpit, very Victorian. Pews, simple Victorian pews. The roof has been restored, but it is still that low-pitched type that was popular in the 15th century, and the clerestory has been added for that. And you can see, in fact, that there are very few windows lower down. There were more. That's the old north door, though. There we have the War Memorial, and the War Memorial here gives the date of 1914 to 1919, which of course 1919 is when the peace treaty is signed. A window here has been blocked up, and there's a memorial over it. The pulpit here is a little bit garish, but never mind. Above the pulpit is a memorial to the Reverend Robert Noble, who died in 1869 at Malta. Quite possibly gone there for his health. He was only 26 when he died, but he restored the church and built the village school, so definitely one of your improving Victorian parsons. The chancel, quite simple. It does contain two stained glass windows. There are only two in the building, and the more modern one, 1960s, is the east window. Watch out for the step. And you've got these fairly simplified images. There's St Columba, St John the Baptist in the middle, and St Margaret of Scotland. not to be confused, of course, with the other St. Margaret. We have here, the St. Margaret Antioch, of course, we have here the Virgin Mary and Christ, and this is memorial to Mary Hill, wife of Charles Hill, who died, and she died in 1916. So this is the beginning of the 20th century, and then just about 50 years later, this is the style. I will make no comment beyond that point. And a nice light nave. The chancel is a bit darker, smaller windows, and of course this is where the stained glass is. So that's the reading desk. It's been moved out of the way to make a bit more room, I suspect. And choir stalls, not many of them. It wouldn't have been a big choir, not a big village to be fair. You can see internal buttressing on the tower there. But a very good, fairly small example of this sort of ironstone church type. Ironstone, as I said before, it's not the best building stone. It's relatively soft, it erodes quite readily. So we'll have a look at the outside now. Just actually for the sake of completeness, there's the organ. Fairly simple instrument. It sits in the south transept, and you can see behind it there's the piscina, because obviously this transept would originally have been a chapel, one of the side chapels of the church. It's now the vestry, and if we pop inside you can see some vestry stuff. There's nothing saying no entry, and here there's a few old photographs, a few old pictures you can see here. This is Grimston and the neighbouring church at Whartonby. And these are just a couple of older pictures. And the picture there is the picture before restoration. And obviously now post-restoration. So we'll see what the outside looks like now. And these would have, well, a couple of corbels. They may have been involved in an earlier roof. They're more likely to have had figures on them. And now we are looking to the pulpit. So here we are outside at Grimston. The south side is not the easiest to film because there's a fairly narrow strip of churchyard between the church and the road, which is a good 10 feet below us behind the camera. So, but you just get some idea here of this nice ironstone building, and it's a very attractive material, particularly weathered as it becomes fairly quickly. But again, the weathering indicates an issue with just how soft the stone is. So we'll have a look around the outside and again point out the salient features. And so here we are outside at Grimston, and that's Grimston Church. Sorry, I jumped the script slightly and back in the script, but no. We are finished. That's Grimston Church for you. Lovely building in this ironstone area of Leicestershire. So thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until next time.